It has often seemed to me that the cross is at once the most incomprehensible and the most illuminating fact in all of history. For here, upon two rough beams of wood, hangs the mystery of the universe. How can justice, unbending and holy, ever dwell in harmony with mercy, tender and forgiving? If we imagine justice alone, the world is too sharp, too merciless, like a sword without a sheath. If we imagine mercy alone, the world dissolves into sentimentality, like a river without banks, flooding and destroying all it touches. But at the cross, these two, justice and mercy, seemingly irreconcilable, are bound together in a union more profound than the marriage of heaven and earth. It is here, at the center of suffering and shame, that God declares both His righteousness and His love. The cross is not merely a symbol, it is the axis on which all reality turns. When I look upon the cross, I am reminded that no man can stand before God's justice and live, for His purity is a fire, consuming all impurity. And yet, paradoxically, it is only in the fire that gold is refined. To demand that God abandon justice in the name of love would be to ask Him to cease being God altogether. For justice is not an added quality to His character. It is His very being, perfect, steadfast, incorruptible. To deny it would be to unravel the universe itself. But how, then, shall mercy enter such a world? Mercy, which stoops low to lift up the fallen. Mercy, which refuses to measure a man by his failures. Mercy, which delights not in punishment, but in restoration. If God were only just, He might crush us beneath the weight of His holiness. If He were only merciful, He might excuse the evil that corrodes the soul. But in Christ crucified, the eternal paradox is resolved. The judge becomes the judged. The innocent bears the weight of the guilty. The hammer of justice falls, and yet it falls upon God Himself. The cross is not, as some would have it, a cruel invention of theology, but the very heart of the divine drama. For the problem of sin is not a trifle, as modern man likes to imagine, nor is forgiveness a casual wave of the hand. To forgive sin without cost is to make a mockery of justice. We all know this instinctively. If a murderer walked free with no consequence, would we call it mercy, or would we cry out against the perversion of justice? And yet, if there were no hope for that murderer, if no path for him to be reconciled, would we not despair of mercy altogether? Thus, God did not wave aside the debt, but paid it Himself. He did not ignore justice, but satisfied it with His own blood. The cross, then, is not merely the cancellation of our guilt, but the deepest unveiling of God's nature. A love so pure that it does not deny holiness, and a holiness so true that it bows low in love. The image that often comes to me is of a mighty cliff face, against which every wave of human rebellion crashes and breaks. Justice is that unyielding rock, immovable because it must be so. But mercy is the cavern at the cliff's heart, into which the waves are drawn, finding shelter rather than destruction. And the entrance to that cavern, dark yet filled with secret light, is none other than the cross. We must never think of the cross as an afterthought, as though God were caught off guard by man's rebellion and devised a desperate solution. No, the cross was woven into the fabric of creation itself, the Lamb slain before the foundation of the world. It is the place where time and eternity intersect. History itself bends towards it, as all rivers flow toward the sea, The stories of Israel, the sacrifices of the temple, the cries of the prophets, all whisper of this meeting point. And the longings of every human heart, even those who know not Christ, find their strange fulfillment here. Consider how every tale of sacrifice, every poem of love, every myth of a hero descending into darkness for the sake of others, is but a dim reflection of this greater truth. The cross is not merely an historical event, but the archetype from which all true stories draw their power. In it, God has written His truth into the fabric of imagination itself. And yet, the cross is not only cosmic, it is also personal. It is not only the world that must be reconciled, but each soul. When I look upon it, I do not merely see the problem of mankind in the abstract. I see myself, for it was my pride, my cowardice, my lovelessness that nailed Him there. And strangely, it is also for me that He hung, that mercy might meet me in the very place where justice condemned me. Here lies the wonder, that justice and mercy do not meet in cold compromise, as though each gave up a little ground. They meet in fullness, each retaining all its force. Justice is not lessened, mercy is not diluted. Both shine brighter because of the other. It is not 50% justice and 50% mercy, but 100% of each, blazing together in a single, unfathomable flame. This is why the cross remains at the center of Christian faith. Without it, God might be admired as Creator, or feared as Judge, but never adored as Savior. Without it, we might long vaguely for forgiveness, but never truly know it. The cross is where sin is unmasked, holiness revealed, and love poured out without measure. It is where every wound finds its balm, every injustice its answer, every sorrow its hope. It is not sentimental to say that all of life is judged by the cross. For every choice we make, whether great or small, is in the end a movement either toward or away from it. We may deny it, we may attempt to ignore it, but its shadow stretches across all history and across every life. One cannot look at it and remain neutral. To stand before the cross is to be compelled either to bow in gratitude or to turn away in scorn. The cross also reveals the true meaning of suffering, for in our pain we are tempted to believe that God is indifferent, or worse, cruel. Yet here is God Himself, not watching from a safe distance, but entering into the darkest abyss of human agony. He does not stand aloof from the cries of the wounded. He utters them Himself. My God, why hast Thou forsaken me? The words of dereliction are not the rebellion of a man against God, but the voice of God taking upon His lips the lament of humanity. And so, when we suffer, we are not abandoned in some alien land. We tread a road already marked with His blood. The cross makes of every valley of sorrow a place where He has walked before us. And here, too, lies hope. For if God can bring from the cross the resurrection, then no darkness is final. No defeat is ultimate. The tree of death blossoms into the tree of life. Justice is satisfied, mercy is triumphant, and love is vindicated. The very instrument of shame becomes the throne of glory. In this reversal, we glimpse the pattern of all things. God is forever making all things new, transfiguring even our worst into His best. Yet, how slow we are to believe it. We, who live in a world of half measures, can scarcely comprehend a love so absolute. We imagine that God forgives reluctantly, as we do. We picture him balancing the scales, excusing us because he must. But the cross reveals the opposite. Forgiveness is costly, not cheap. It cost him everything, and therefore it is offered freely to us. If ever we are tempted to think lightly of sin, let us look upon the cross. If ever we are tempted to despair of forgiveness, let us look upon it again. The cross is also a call. It does not permit us to stand as mere spectators, admiring from afar. To see him crucified is to hear him beckoning, "Take up your cross and follow me." The Christian life is not a life of ease, but of participation in his pattern, death to self and life in God. We are not asked to add to his sacrifice as though it were insufficient, but to be united with it, letting his death become ours and his life our resurrection. In this light, every act of love, however small, is a reflection of Calvary. To forgive one who has wronged us, to bear another's burden, to give without expecting return. These are crosses, not in the sense of misfortune, but of chosen self-giving. And they are radiant because they join us to him. Indeed, the cross shows us what it means to be human. For to be human is not merely to exist, nor merely to pursue pleasure, nor even to strive after virtue. To be human is to love as God loves, and love always bears a cross. To shrink from it is to shrink from our destiny. To embrace it is to become more real, more alive, more ourselves than ever before. And so the cross, which the world sees as folly, is in truth wisdom. The world sees it as weakness, but it is the power of God. The world sees it as defeat, but it is the victory of victories. For on that hill outside Jerusalem, the universe was turned right side up. Death itself was wounded, and evil unmasked as impotent. Let us never imagine, then, that the cross is a relic of the past, belonging only to an ancient story. It is the present tense of God's love, continually drawing men and women out of darkness into light. It is the key that unlocks every prison, the banner that waves over every battle, the bridge that spans the gulf between the holy God and sinful man. To stand at the foot of the cross is to know simultaneously the gravity of sin and the greatness of grace. It is to be humbled, for my sin is exposed, and it is to be exalted, for my worth is affirmed. The same nails that declare me guilty also declare me beloved, and so justice and mercy meet, not in abstraction, but in the pierced hands and side of Christ. At the cross, we come face to face with the strange arithmetic of God. We live in a world where debts must be repaid, wounds demand retaliation, and power is sought for its own sake. But here, in this place of crucifixion, the sums are rewritten. The debt of the many is borne by the one. The infinite cost of sin is covered by an infinite sacrifice, and the weakness of the crucified Christ proves stronger than the strength of empires. What appears to be the end is, in truth, the beginning. This is why the cross both attracts and offends. It attracts because the human heart longs for such mercy. It offends because it humbles our pride. To come to the cross is to admit that we could not save ourselves. Our cleverness, our virtue, our religion, all collapse in the presence of that battered figure. The cross strips us bare, reminding us that salvation is not achieved, but received. And in this receiving, we discover that humility is not humiliation, but liberation. The cross also redefines glory. In our minds, glory is associated with triumph, crowns, and applause. Yet here, God's glory is revealed in a broken body, in the surrender of all earthly power. The King reigns not from a jeweled throne, but from a gibbet. His coronation is a crown of thorns. And yet, is it not precisely here that His majesty shines brightest? For any tyrant can seize power, but only infinite love can lay it down willingly for the sake of His enemies. This is not weakness, but the strength of a love that no hatred can exhaust. Think of it this way. When we gaze at the night sky, the stars are brightest in the darkness. So too, the light of God's love blazes most brilliantly against the black canvas of Calvary. The world thought it was extinguishing Him, but in truth it was unveiling Him. As the sun is most dazzling when it breaks through storm clouds, so the love of Christ bursts forth most clearly through the storm of His suffering. Here, then, lies our hope for every sorrow. For if even this, the crucifixion of the Son of God, was woven by divine hands into a tapestry of redemption, then surely He can weave our smaller sufferings into patterns of grace. The cross assures us that nothing is wasted. Every tear, every loss, every cross borne in His name is caught up into His own great sacrifice and transfigured into life. And we must not forget, the cross is not the end. It points beyond itself to resurrection. Justice and mercy meet upon the wood, but they triumph in the empty tomb. Yet without the cross, the resurrection would be meaningless, an act of power without an act of love. With the cross, however, resurrection becomes the vindication of love, the eternal testimony that mercy has not canceled justice, but fulfilled it. So when we kneel before the cross, let us not see it as a monument to despair, but as a gateway to glory. The beams of that rough wood stretch not only upward and outward, but forward into eternity. The justice that condemns me, the mercy that saves me, both converge here. And from here they send me out into the world with a new identity, forgiven, beloved, restored. It is no exaggeration to say that the cross is the center of all things. History, before it looked forward to it in shadows and signs. History, after it looks back in remembrance and hope. Heaven itself sings of it, for the Lamb who was slain is forever the song of eternity, and the human heart, restless and searching, finds its rest only here. The cross, I believe, also exposes the true nature of evil. We often imagine evil to be simply the sum of human vices, greed, lust, pride, cruelty. But at Calvary, we see evil in its most concentrated form, the world conspiring to destroy its maker. Religion, politics, and ordinary men alike joined hands in that dark hour. The priests cried for His death, the soldiers drove the nails, and the crowd mocked His agony. Yet, behind their actions lay a darker power, the prince of this world, who believed he had triumphed. But herein lies the irony. The very act of apparent victory became His defeat. For when Christ was lifted up, He disarmed the powers of darkness, making a spectacle of them. Evil, in trying to snuff out the light, only revealed how powerless it is against the eternal flame of God's love. This is why the cross is not simply about forgiveness, though it is that, nor merely about an example, though it is that as well. It is about victory. The serpent's fangs were broken at Calvary. Death, once the great tyrant, was unmasked as a defeated foe, and though its shadow still lingers over our world, it is but the shadow of a beast already slain. The cross does not merely pardon us, it liberates us. It does not merely wipe away the record of wrongs, it shatters the chains that bound us to sin and fear. We must learn, then, to see the cross not only as a past event, but as a present power. It is the power to forgive when forgiveness feels impossible, for we have been forgiven at infinite cost. It is the power to endure when suffering presses in, for Christ endured the worst and rose victorious. It is the power to love when hatred surrounds us, for His love was poured out upon those who least deserved it. The cross is not a relic in a museum of faith. It is the living pulse of Christianity, the heartbeat of the Church, and the very breath of every believer. And yet, the cross is also scandalous. The world cannot understand how salvation could come through weakness, nor how the death of one man could redeem the lives of many. But this scandal is precisely its wisdom. For had God chosen the path of worldly strength, we might admire Him, but we would not be changed. It is in His weakness, in His suffering, in His apparent defeat, that our hearts are pierced and our pride undone. The cross tells us that love is stronger than might, that humility is greater than power, that self-giving is more enduring than self-assertion. It is worth noticing, too, how the cross gathers together the whole human race. At its foot stand the devout and the indifferent, the guilty and the innocent, the cruel and the compassionate. The thief on one side mocks, the thief on the other believes. The soldier thrusts a spear, and yet another soldier proclaims, "Truly this was the Son of God." In this mingling of reactions, we see the human story distilled. The cross is not addressed to one people, one nation, one era. It speaks to all. It demands of all a response. And so the question presses, what shall we do with this Christ? Shall we turn away, clinging to our self-sufficiency? Or shall we kneel, confessing that here, in His death, is our life? For neutrality is impossible. The cross divides as surely as it unites. To some, it is folly. To others, it is the power of God. And once we have knelt, once we have embraced the mercy offered here, the cross ceases to be a distant event and becomes our daily companion. It shapes how we live, how we love, how we die. Every morning we may awaken to its truth. I am a sinner, yet I am forgiven. Justice has been satisfied, mercy has triumphed, and love has claimed me forever. The cross, in its essence, is not only the place where our guilt is answered, but the place where our longing is met. For every heart carries within it a homesickness, a deep ache that no earthly pleasure can cure. We chase after wealth, after knowledge, after companionship, and though these bring moments of joy, they never silence the deeper cry. It is as though we are exiles, yearning for a country we have not yet seen, a song we half remember, but cannot fully sing. The cross tells us that this yearning is not an illusion. It is the echo of Eden and the promise of heaven. At Calvary, God comes to meet us in our exile, and through His suffering, He opens the gate to our true home. Think of it this way: a bridge stretched over a chasm. On one side, man, estranged, guilty, restless. On the other side, God, holy, radiant, perfect. Between them, a gulf as vast as eternity. No effort of ours could ever span it. But upon the beams of the cross, God lays a bridge secure and sure, and across this bridge mercy and justice walk together, leading us into reconciliation. Every soul that dares to set foot upon it finds that the bridge holds, not because of our strength, but because of His. And yet, the cross does not remove the mystery. Indeed, it deepens it. For who can fathom such love? That the infinite would stoop to the finite, that the immortal would embrace death, that the sinless would become sin for us. We may spend a lifetime contemplating it, and at the end we will still stand as children on the shore of an infinite sea. But this is no cause for despair. It is cause for wonder, for adoration, for worship. For we are not asked to comprehend it fully, but to receive it humbly. The cross also teaches us how to face our own deaths. For we too must one day walk into that dark valley. Left to ourselves, we might dread it, imagining it as the great void, the extinguishing of all we love. But Christ has gone before us. He has tasted death, drained its bitter cup, and transformed it into a passage. What was once the end has become, through Him, the beginning. The Christian dies not in despair, but in hope, not as a prisoner dragged to execution, but as a child going home. And so, my friends, the cross is not merely a doctrine to be studied or a symbol to be admired. It is the very center of life. It is the call to take up our own crosses, the assurance of God's victory, the proof of His love, the pledge of our hope. It is where justice and mercy meet, not in compromise, but in triumph. To look upon the cross is to see the whole truth of the universe condensed into a single image, that love is the deepest law of all, and that this love is strong enough to bear the full weight of justice without breaking, tender enough to stoop to the lowest sinner without shaming. Here, then, is the invitation, to live beneath the shadow of this cross, to let its pattern shape our days, to let its power steady our steps, and to let its hope carry us home. The cross is also the great leveling ground of humanity. At its foot, no man may boast, and no man need despair. The king and the beggar, the scholar and the child, the saint and the criminal, all stand alike before it. Our achievements cannot raise us higher, nor can our failures sink us lower, for all are measured not by human standards, but by Christ's sacrifice. This is why pride withers at the cross. Whatever crowns we have gathered are cast aside, for what use are they before the pierced brow of the King of Kings? And despair too is banished, for if He has stooped to bear my sin, then no abyss is too deep for His mercy to reach. In this way, the cross binds together justice and mercy, not only in God, but also among men. If I have been forgiven at so great a cost, how can I withhold forgiveness from my brother? If Christ bore my punishment, how can I demand that another bear the full weight of mine? The cross dismantles the walls of hostility and builds in their place the fellowship of the redeemed. It creates a new society, not bound by race or class or culture, but by blood, the blood of Christ. And this fellowship is not merely an earthly community. It is the seed of eternity. For the cross does not simply save individuals. It creates a people shaped by self-giving love, defined by humility, and destined for glory. The Church, for all her flaws, is meant to be the living echo of Calvary in the world, a company of men and women who bear the mark of the cross upon their lives. Where this is truly lived, the world cannot help but take notice. Consider also the beauty of this truth, that in the cross, God has taken the worst the world can do, betrayal, injustice, cruelty, death, and turned it into the very instrument of salvation. This is the divine alchemy, by which lead is turned to gold, darkness to light, despair to hope. And if he can do this with the cross, he can surely do it with the crosses we bear. Our losses, our sorrows, our wounds, all can be caught up into his redeeming work, transformed into the raw material of grace. Nothing is wasted in the economy of the cross. I sometimes think of the cross as the great melody of creation. From the beginning, faint notes of it have echoed in every corner of life. The longing for justice, the cry for mercy, the ache for love. At Calvary, the melody bursts into fullness, the great theme played in all its power. And in the resurrection, the music swells into a symphony that will never end. To live as a Christian is to join our small voices to this great song, to let our lives become instruments through which the melody of the cross is heard. And so the cross asks of us not only contemplation, but imitation. We are called not merely to adore Christ crucified, but to follow him, to forgive as he forgave, to love as he loved, to lay down our lives in ways great or small, for it is in losing our lives that we find them, in carrying our cross that we discover our crown. At last, we may say this: the cross is not the end of the story, but the story's climax. Beyond it lies resurrection. Beyond resurrection lies glory, and beyond glory lies the eternal kingdom where justice and mercy are not in tension, but in perfect harmony. Yet even then, when all tears are wiped away, we shall never forget the cross, for it is the doorway through which we entered, the foundation upon which all stands, the everlasting reminder of the love that would not let us go. As I prepare to conclude these reflections, let me leave you with one final vision of the cross. Imagine, if you will, all the threads of human history, bright threads of beauty and love, dark threads of sin and cruelty, frayed edges of sorrow and longing, being gathered together into one point. That point is Calvary. Here, upon those beams of rough wood, God himself wove them into a pattern we could never have conceived, a tapestry where justice shines like the sun, and mercy flows like a river, both eternal, both triumphant. The cross is not simply one event among many, but the hinge upon which all else turns. Before it, mankind groped in shadows, hoping for redemption. After it, we walk in the dawning light of forgiveness. And at its heart is not merely a doctrine, but a person, the Son of God, arms outstretched, bearing the weight of sin, opening the way of life. What, then, is asked of us? Not payment, for the debt is already settled. Not perfection, for the work is already complete. What is asked is trust, the surrender of our pride, the bowing of our knees before the one who bowed his head for us. Faith is nothing less than leaning wholly upon the finished work of Christ, letting his mercy cover us and his justice set us free. And if we do so, the cross ceases to be a distant symbol and becomes the very rhythm of our lives. It teaches us to forgive because we are forgiven. It teaches us to love because we are loved. It teaches us to suffer with hope, because he suffered and conquered. Every cross we bear, whether it be pain, loss, or sacrifice, becomes, through him, not a sign of despair, but a doorway into deeper life. One day we shall see its full meaning, for in the age to come, when justice reigns perfectly, and mercy overflows endlessly, we shall still sing of the Lamb who was slain. The wounds of Christ are not erased in glory. They shine forever as jewels of love. And when we behold them, we shall understand at last that all our longings were leading here, to the God who did not spare himself, but gave himself wholly for us. Until that day, let us live as those who have been touched by this mystery. Let us carry its truth into our homes, our work, our sorrows, our joys. Let us be people of the cross, marked by humility, bound by mercy, radiant with hope. For in a world torn by division, the cross still stands as the meeting place of justice and mercy, the beacon of love stronger than death. And so, dear friends, if these words have stirred something within you, I invite you to journey further with us. Like this message, if it has blessed you, share it, that others too may find light in their darkness. Leave your reflections, that together we may grow in understanding, and do subscribe, that you may not miss the continuing path of wisdom and hope.